All right, thank you for staying with us. It is 85 days to the 2023 general election. And as Nigeria prepares to hold its 7th consecutive general election since return to democracy in 1999, the presidential poll has been described as one of the most anticipated in the history of the country. The number of Nigerians that might vote in the election has increased given the large number of people who registered for their PVCs. According to data from the Independent National Electoral Commission, 95 million Nigerians will vote in next year's presidential polls. Nigerians want INEC to conduct a free, fair, and credible election that will produce the president of their choice. And Cross River State Governor Ben Ayade is lending his voice to that call. Joining us via Zoom is the Executive Governor of Cross River State, Ben Ayade. Your Excellency, good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you and good morning to you.
Now, there are those who say that the 2023 election is not like every other election we have had in the country, and it has this high expectation. I'm wondering if you share the same sentiment and why you think it is so.
Well, I share the same feeling because indeed the 2023 election will be actually a watershed in our history. It's an election that is characterized by a very superb, robust, and well-structured INEC with a beaver system, almost idiot-proof, with a change in currency, also refusing and denying the luxury of the facilitation of election processes with money. And so, indeed, it will be a full test case of a professional electioneering process. Where the votes will now count in truth without inducement either by money or other material considerations. So I think it will be a classical departure from the past.
It's an interesting question I want to ask you because I asked another governor who is navigating so many elections at the same time. How do you handle it? You're supporting your presidential candidate, you're working for him. You're working for your senatorial ambition. You are also working to get to support other senatorial candidates in your party, in the state, those in the House of Reps. You're also supporting the governorship candidate of your party going forward. How do you navigate all of this? Because one governor told me that, I have so many things on my plate. I have to do this, I have to do that. I have to also make sure I deliver myself.
Yeah, it's actually true. Particularly in the office of governor, to make matters worse, I'm coordinating the South-South for our party, the great APC party. I'm actually the coordinator of the state as well, as far as also I'm running for the Senate. I have governorship candidate, I have House of Assembly candidate, I have House of Reps candidate, I have senatorial candidates. Indeed, but the truth is that we actually have only 3 elections. The National Assembly elections, the State House of Assembly and governorship election, and the presidential election. So it's actually 3 major elections. The structural and normative framework to deliver them, all of these elections, is fixed within a calculation prism that allows you a sophisticated planning that you can fix all these 3, given the time frame. Take note that we actually have 2 election dates. One, the day it will comes with all the National Assembly elections and the presidential election. That's one day. 2 weeks after, you have another election, which is the state elections. So basically, the planning has to do with conducting 2 elections. And so it sounds very detailed and complex, but actually much simpler if you apply a bit of science and knowledge.
Right. Recently, you are quoted as saying that the presidential candidate of your party is the most experienced among the candidates seeking to succeed President Muhammadu Buhari. And the question for me is how critical experience comes to play in managing the affairs of a country like ours.
You must understand that when you've never been there, it always looks easy. It's always easier from the distance. I've been the chief executive of a state And I have seen the pitfalls, the internal mechanisms that deliver failure. Experience remains the best teacher. If you've never had a government, it's easier to stay and criticize. And so Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been a governor of Lagos State. So experientially, he's been tested. He has a recruitment process that guarantees confidence. It's not somebody who is driven by ethnic sensitivity. It's one governor when he was that had commissioners from outside of the Lagos State. He has a style that he has his eyes on and hands ready, which means he delegates, but he's sensitive and ready to take over and take charge when there's a system failure. And I think that the best way you can test somebody is to run a small system like a governor of a state. Then you can really, really appraise. I always say, anybody who tries to criticize a governor, please try to be governor first. Then you know how it is to be a governor. So I think he's come with a lot of robust experience, moving an economy whose IGRA was 6 billion naira to 60 billion naira, setting up a roadmap for Lagos that today is almost the fourth largest economy in Africa. So in cumulative sense, I think it comes with a gamut of experience that you can't take away. The amount of intellect you need to drive a system at that level is far more than the amount of physical energy. What you need is a thought process. It's the ability to be able to select. Is that recruitment process, selection of competent hands, irrespective of ethnic or religious bias. That's what Tinubu has in excess. I remember even having an issue when I was in PDP, and I walked to him for assistance. He gave the support without even thinking twice, in spite of the fact that I was a PDP governor. And so such people with such big hearts, you can't, and that's what the country needs. Somebody whose heart is big, who has capacity. If not, and then the balance of politics, it's in his favor, because indeed it's the turn of the South. And so all fits in very well, and I think he's the right person at this time.
Congratulations, your senatorial admission has just been affirmed in the courts and so on and so forth. But I know that you have been a senator before, and you're trying to go back there. It's a different kind of job from being a governor, because it doesn't have the excitement and the kind of challenge that you have here, you're having currently and you're about concluding as governor. How exciting are you about becoming a senator again?
First, I like your question. 2 years after being a senator in 2011, I lost the enthusiasm to sustain that office. I felt I was too active, too committed to run such a very humble office, where your opinion doesn't really matter, where your resolutions don't find its effectuity in the executive arm of government. I just didn't want to be a statistic. And so by my third year as a senator, I already started suffering atrophy. I was already getting fatigued with the office, because the biggest dreams I had, all the ideas that you thought you could add value, they weren't really coming on stream. And so ordinarily, having finished I'm concluding my second term as governor, the Senate could not have been my choice. But I also realized that I struggled to become president of Nigeria, because I know what I've got to offer. But that did not come my way. But a great opportunity. I hold a master's degree in law. I'm a lawyer, a very experienced one at that, over 10 years post-call. So I just thought, with my legal background, having been a senator in 2011 up to 2015 and a two-term governor, I can't just return to my private business, which is still very successful, branching into agro-industrialization, and I'm doing well in that respect. If I hold back all of this, my experience, I won't be adding value to this country. So I also have done a calculation about how many ranking senators are coming out of the south of Nigeria into the National Assembly. And I thought it's a great opportunity to get into the leadership. And the leadership of the National Assembly is very critical It was a successful regime. People don't understand a very robust National Assembly, a Senate leadership can play a major role in determining the policy thrust of an administration. For example, the power of appropriation lies entirely with the National Assembly. Whatever comes from the executive are just budget estimates. The main budget, which eventually gets passed into law, has the full arrogance and power of the National Assembly, which makes them a very vital force. Therefore, coming back to the Senate, hopefully at the leadership level, we'll be able to provide a direction. And I will, God willing, I will. I give you an example. How can a nation producing with a deposit of over 42 billion tons of bitumen import almost every single drop? How can you have 3 billion tons of iron ore and we lie prostrate? How can a country account for the fourth largest production of cocoa in the world and every chocolate is imported? How can a nation produce crude oil and import refined petroleum products? How can a 10,000 barrels of crude refinery, which costs less than $100 million, yet we don't have a functional refinery? How can you put 1.6 billion in a turnaround maintenance for a refinery? $1.6 billion. With far less than that can build you 100,000 barrels per day refinery. There's a systemic failure that needs to be cured by people who've got long experience. I come from an oil and gas background. I'm into facility engineering, oil and gas pipelines. I'm into foundation drillings. I'm into foundation work. I'm into piling. I'm into offshore research. I'm into environmental toxicology. I'm into crude oil export quality analysis. I've been a lecturer, a professor, a businessman. And so I come with a gamut of experience. The carrying capacity is huge. And of course, I ran a state as governor with the highest number of industries in the history of Nigeria. So the experience is huge. And that can come together as an armada that can help drive a new direction for Nigeria.
There will be those who will
I mean, if I was to take some of the projects that are ongoing now, if I was in a position to influence them, I know what I would do and I would do differently.
There are those who will be asking, how come this experience that you mentioned, you didn't bring it to play the first time you were senator?
And the first time I was a senator, I've already expressed my frustration as a senator. I brought out a bill of housing as a right. Professor Akim Abuje's projected 16 million housing deficiency, and then Maslow's law provides housing under the basic pyramids of needs. And I insisted for any economy to change, the primary production has to be kept up. And one good way of doing that is to build houses. Surveyors, lawyers, engineers, town planners, everybody will use it, including market women, banana sellers. But if we make housing as a right, it means social housing will become a key factor that government should implement. That bill went through second reading, and that was the end of it because of budgetary constraints, because you need a lot of concurrence. So if you're not in leadership, if you're a first-time senator, there's very little, if you're not ranking, there's very little you can actually achieve. So I'm coming back here as a stinkingly ranking senator, a senator of the 7th Senate, returning on the 10th Senate. I'll be a very old ranking senator, coming with a very old head on young shoulders. Gives me opportunity to do much, much more than what I did as a first-time senator. Don't forget, even as a first-time senator, I had the highest number of bills. As at that 2015, when I was leaving the Senate, I had the highest number of bills in Nigerian Senate history.
Now, the region you are in, you are coordinating the South-South, is regarded as a PDP stronghold. All the governors there are PDP. You got elected as a PDP governor, you've now moved to APC. Do you find yourself like a fish out of water?
No, I really don't, because politics is local. In Cross River State, almost to every local government, I have an industry, I have something to point that I have shown that I brought beneficiation of power and there's a in a peaceful for the community. So if you take local government by local government, you will see my handwork strong enough to deliver Cross River State to my party. And so I don't feel frightened or I don't feel scared at all about South-South. South-South as a whole, if I take each state and analyze each state within the South-South, you will find that APC will be taking the South-South clean and sweeping.
So what is the number of votes you are looking perhaps to deliver for the party?
Well, in my state, I'm very optimistic that I should be able to deliver 1 million votes comfortably, and I can do the detailed analysis for you. If you take the southern part of Cross River State and look at the detailed infrastructural development, Calabar-Odukwane dualization completed, the spaghetti flyover at 90% completion, doing the last reinforcement for us to have the deck ready for final asphalt. If we take within the same southern senatorial district, we have a very big garment factory up and running. We have a pharmaceutical factory. We have the instant noodle factory, the feed processing factory, the chicken processing factory. We have the rice seedling factory. We have a power plant, one at Adiabo, which is a 27 megawatt gas-fired turbine. And we have another one, 23 megawatts parliamentary extension. All this within the same zone. We have the pylon factory set up. We have a very special Teachers Continuous Training Institute, the first in Africa, full up and running, all within the Southern Senatorial District. And roads and roads and roads. And I don't bother about big ceremonies, about making huge noise about them, because truly, at a certain level you get, let your work speak for you. And in the fullness of time, my work will speak for me. If you get to Central, the largest producers of cocoa indeed in Nigeria, even though we're rated number 2, they have a big and the first cocoa processing factory from cocoa bean to chocolate bar, fully ready, fully operational, just waiting for a major investor who will take it up and drive the process. The same place you have around the Central Senatorial District, we have the Boki East-West Road that they said only World Bank or United Nations can do that road. One local government going through 5 local governments to get to another part of the local government. I did the flyover there, I did the bridge there, fixed that road. Today, you can drive from the eastern part of Boki to western part of Boki. And for them, it is an impossibility that Ayade has achieved. And that's why a huge number of the young people there coming out in their numbers. I started this food on the table program, a social security system, putting 30,000, 100,000, 150,000, depending on category, and bringing thousands of young men on board. We've been able to manage hunger and poverty. In the northern part of the state, we have the Obodo German Hospital, which is a world-class hospital. It has a cancer unit, oncology unit, very sophisticated, with a brachytherapy, the highest level of cancer treatment, so many equipment to measure MRI, the CT scan, they are all there. We just started a medical outreach there. Cath lab is there, something you would never imagine to find in Obodo. Just get there and see what Siemens in partnership with Coast Carriers and Cross River State have done in that hospital. The international airport is almost ready. There's a dual carriage road ranging from Obodo, Baliku, up to Yala, local government. The full senatorial district line up with almost 100 kilometers of dual carriage road, which is the longest branch carriage road ever done by any governor in Nigerian history. No noise being made about it. And so where are you going to be coming from? Or you're looking at the rice mill, which is the most sophisticated and the first and only vitaminized rice mill in Nigeria. It's there in Ogoja, and that's the rice we're going to be distributing this Christmas. And we've even called opposition party, come to the mill and see. But you see, unfortunately, the political system through which we throw up leadership is dysfunctional, because what happens is that your failure is your success. So you have citizens of your society whose ambition is for you to fail so that their party can win. And that's why I think that the third world is a shame. And I think that's why I think the democratic structure that Nigeria practices today is a failure. It's not the right thing. You're practicing a democracy that is practiced in an advanced world. So how can you bring in a political structure of the first world into a third world? How could you bring in democracy that you did not customize to reflect the African conflicts and sensitivities? How could you bring in a democracy that is very cannibalistic, very primitivistic and atavistic, where the failure of a government leads to the success of another, which means a segment of your own system is deliberately set up to destroy and make you fail. You finish putting a power plant, somebody goes and dig out all the armored cables and give you a sense of shame. You have a factory processing, somebody goes and steal the motor so that you will not be able to function, and then turn back and make a joke of it. And so we need to evolve the democratic structure. While democracy is getting more transparent, but I think this is not the kind of democracy that Nigeria needs at this time. Countries that have done very well, that have moved from third world to first world, have structures government that allow continuity of a fairly reasonable time. If you take Dubai, Saudi Arabia, I can go on and on. Countries that have full control of their governance architecture and drive to success. They're not driven by just almost every 2 years you have an election. Because 4-year term, before you know it, you're done due for another election. So there's a continuous cycle of election after cycle. Nigeria is a country in political cycles in perpetuity. All we do is to do elections. And that's what is keeping this country down.
All right, Your Excellency, we need to quickly go on a commercial break. When we return, we'll continue the conversation with you. Please stay with us.
Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you for staying with us once again. Quickly, there is an issue that came up yesterday. The Minister for State and National Planning, Clement Agba, has blamed the governors for the level of poverty in the country. Recall that about a week ago, the MBS came up with statistics where he said over 100 million Nigerians have been plunged into multi-dimensional poverty. And in reacting to that, the minister said that the federal government has come up with social programs, but that governors have not come up with complementary programs that will affect especially persons in the rural areas. And I'm asking you, I would like for you rather to react to what the minister has said. Can you categorically say that the people in your state, especially those in the rural areas, have benefited from most of the projects you mentioned earlier before we went on the break? They can actually see and feel the dividends of democracy.
Yes, I would say for sure that we have one government, and I would not want to do a critical appraisal of the statement of the minister. But indeed, a lot of Nigerians have been thrown into poverty. This is exacerbated by the current global trends. But to narrow it down to governors alone would be a bit unfair. There are so many circumstances. The micro and particularly the macroeconomic climate, which is beyond the modulation of governors. He may not even realize how challenging it is for governors to pay salaries. You may not even realize how shameful it is for the level of the devaluation of the naira and the associated cumulative downstream impact on projects that have been executed by governors. But be that as it were, I just want to narrow my summary to Cross River State. In Cross River State, perhaps you don't know this, Cross River is not owing salary, it's not owing pension. Cross River has the most extensive amount of thousands of young people brought into government. We have a team of a category of people who earn money for no work done. And people ask me, why are you employing, appointing since 2015? Today you have over 30,000 people who are already on appointments of direct government appointments. And recently you just released another large list of almost 50,000 people who get 30,000 a month. And I said, you don't realize it. There's a single element of criminality hidden in every one of us. If environmental factors have not made yours to manifest, you think you're a decent man, unless you're pushed to the wall. And so for a nation to really develop, you need to reduce the level of poverty. And that's why Kedishan Chori allows you the luxury of awarding a contract for somebody to dig a hole and giving another a contract to close it, just to create an economic activity. What we've done here is that cross-river money should not cross the river. And so we rather distribute all resources across every person to reduce the level of emboloscopy, reduce social tension, and allow opportunity to usher in a prosperity agenda. However, in terms of what I have done and the direct impact on communities, I give you a typical example. We have a vegetable oil processing factory. I set up one in Gakem, I set up one in Yanya, all of the Kwara local government area, which is the largest granule production zone in the south of Nigeria. Now, having set such a factory there, now we're encouraging the rural people to go into granule production. If you get to Obaleko, we set up a maize processing factory. It's an advanced stage in Baby in Obaleko local government area. So you have a large cache of farmlands and plantations to grow maize from where we will produce sorbitol and industrial sweeteners. If you come to a place like Ikom, now we're encouraging people to go into massive cocoa farming because of the setting up of the cocoa processing factory. In Obubra, we have a massive cassava processing factory to produce industrial starch and pharmaceutical starch. Now, the cassava, Obubra is the #1 cassava growing community in the whole of Nigeria. Now, if you go there now, you see this factory. So there is a direct linkage between my industrialization and the primary source of raw material as it affects the direct community. What that is required is the community itself to key into this production requires financial support. That kind of support comes from a more federal structure because governors do not. I just give you a shameful story of Cross River State. Cross River State gets most times zero allocation, minus allocation, at the very best, 1-2 billion naira. That makes it the lowest in terms of this federal allocation because we lost oil wells, a stabilization fund of 500 million being overtaken by a monthly debit of between 1.6 to 2.2 billion. We're not oil producing, not part of 13% derivation, reduced to want in body, in spirit, and soul. And federal government sits down and gives jobs in hundreds of billions on infrastructure when people are poor and hungry. The primary purpose of government, Section 14, Subsection 2, provides that the security and welfare of citizens is the primary purpose of government. So your skyscrapers, your big dream projects mean nothing when your people are poor. Federal government must realize that the amount of money invested in certain projects were absolutely not necessary. If we had created a federal ministry of new cities and every city was busy developing houses, you will see that this money will permeate the entire economy. If federal government just simply shut down our doors and say we will stop importing refined petroleum products, we will stop exporting crude oil, we will ask all oil companies in Nigeria that produce up to 200,000 barrels per day to have a refinery, a modular refinery. In Tabasco, in Mexico, in every 3-4 oil wells, you have an oil refinery. You don't have to, I mean, this is a country where we take our gas to power. We're still building gas to power technology. That's a disaster in the 21st century. Gas is for nanotechnology. Gas is a feedstock for industrial production. Gas is not to generate electricity. You have, look, I can take, let it not be an issue between us and federal government. Federal government ought to know that this nation does not require big projects. It requires programs that create jobs for our citizens. You give Nigeria a bad name as if we're armed robbers, we're criminals all over the world, the visa restrictions on Nigeria. But I ask any of those countries, if they were young Nigerians, when they come out of university, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, you don't have a job. Try that in UK, try that in the US, try that anywhere in the advanced world. You see the level of criminality. Nigerian young people have been very patient with this system. And I think the next government, which is part of why I'm going back to the Senate, we need to change our rules and the mentality of development. Development is centered on people, not infrastructure. What can you do for a young man who is out of school to be able to get a job? You have young girls who have almost all turned into prostitution because of the challenges. How can you expect a successful future when almost every young girl finds herself in a social miasma of some sort? Not because that is her choice, but because of circumstance. You come out of university at the age of 23 as a young girl, 3, 5, 6, 7 years down the line, no marriage, no job. You're pushing her to a critical carrying capacity. And so when the deviant attitude starts manifesting, no halatuous womb can give birth to a virtuous child. And we don't realize that that's the cascade and the cumulative impact of the failure of government to recognize that people are the center of government. Development in a third world is about people. And until we begin to densify and footfall governance to reflect on the happiness index of citizens, you would have failed. Electricity supply, big projects, that's not development. until we recognize that and begin to focus on our citizens. And that's what I ask myself. How many people have I brought to the feeding table? How many people do I think that I have made a difference in their life? And please, even my worst critic will tell you that I have the highest number of appointees in Nigeria, not because I do need them. But of course, that is the principle of the 595 rule. 95% of people in the public service are not required, but it's part of the social engineering. And that's what I've done. I depend on 5% of my appointees to deliver my critical value system. And until the minister understands that a governor can do very little. And let me give you one sad story. You imagine that state governors cannot borrow. Cross River is a classic example where I met a debt profile that was 378 billion to 403 billion, with total number of court cases over 1,800 court cases. That is what I am carrying. And so when somebody will turn back and say governors are not doing policy, I just sympathize with them, because if you sit on my seat as a governor of Cross River State with the lowest allocation in the country, with the amount of projects I'm doing, with the number of roads, floating Cali air, starting an airport, you start asking me, where am I getting the money to do what I'm doing? But it's intellectual money. But I think governors are working very hard. Governors are the brunt of the society and get a very bad name. And that's why almost every governor is a candidate for EFCC after leaving office. Just single out a certain sector of people and criminalize them. It's an unfair treatment to governors. There's no governor who leaves office and is not going through torture. You start wishing you were not a governor at all. Well, how have we gone to that? And you think you're hurting them, you're creating international impression that Nigerian governors are thieves. Look, somebody told me in the US, the love of killings every day goes on in the US. You're not allowed to report it. It's a policy. They control it. This is the only country you open a TV, all you get is bad news from beginning to the end. And only bad news sells. We have not managed, and the federal government needs to take responsibility and do the right thing. Provide job for citizens, provide accommodation and housing, and take it as a responsibility. If there's one thing I would do in the Senate, is to go and ensure that housing is a right for citizens, the right to accommodation, the right to a good job is a citizen duty. It's responsibility and obligations of government. And that is why they have surrendered their rights to their natural resources. So you take them as government to be able to provide them a sense of hope. You cease to have the right to taxation when you abuse the tax. And that's why I think that the minister's statement was too sweeping, even though there's some point as it varies from case to case. But in general sense, it's a bit too stretched. It's too strong a statement to make of governance.
You made some very significant points there about the fact that you don't get a lot of allocation, you don't get a lot of money. I know the last time I interviewed you, it was also an inflection point. How do you get the money when you don't get this allocation? You use the expression intellectual, you used it again. How do you do that? How people want to know, because you have very big name projects in your state already. I have seen them myself once when I visited. Now, that is one part of the question. The other part of the question is, people have always held you to account on the issue of employing so many people, like you're trying to get them out of poverty. But people are saying that how do you navigate the issue of productivity and indulgence? Because these people, as you said, probably don't have much to do, but you're keeping them out of criminality. But then how do you navigate between that and making young people productive?
Again, that's the innocence of a developing economy. In developing economy and in a federal structure where government takes even ownership of crude oil in your father's compound, you have a duty, and that crude oil is produced, shared among citizens, among states. There's a sense of entitlement by every citizen and a right. And so where there's extreme poverty, one way of managing criminality is to ensure that somebody has food on his table. So my first term strategic program was to do food on a table. So while society is at peace, I'm having industrial harmony, I'm industrializing. By second term, I will move to hands on the plow. So if you had an appointment for no real work being done, just to put food on the table and create a rural economy, by second term, I'll move you to hands on the plow. So now you're in the farm. Now we have set up the industries. It's time for you to leave this white-collar job I've given to you and move it to the field to now grow the raw material that will feed the industry. It's a process. It's a process. You cannot will into existence development overnight. You cannot take for granted the massive population of Nigeria. You cannot take for granted the reality that all those your armored cables will bury by way of trying to do metropolitan electricity is being stolen overnight. By who? The same hungry persons. So it doesn't make sense for you to continue to think of development without factoring the fact that there's one citizen out there who has no contact in government but needs to feed. If you come to Cross River and do a statistical analysis of the number of marriages, the number of new houses built, the offertory in churches, the school enrollment, private schools, ability to pay your hospital bills across Cross River State in the last 7 years plus of my administration, you will see that this program works magic. There was a time in this state, planes couldn't come to Calabar because of low occupancy. But today, you cannot get a space on the flight to come to Calabar. You almost have to book at a very exorbitant price or 1 or 2 weeks notice. This is to tell you that I understand. I hold a master's in business administration. I have 7 degrees in 4 different fields. So I come from a very strong experience, and at 26, I was already counting huge money. So I've stayed long enough to know that, and of course, weaponized by childhood poverty. So I come from a poor background and ran into good wealth at a tender age. So I'm very balanced. This strategy is the only way you can keep society safe. And that's why Cross River, if you ask the Nigerian police, we are the lowest in terms of crime rates. The very lowest. Indeed, every criminal we catch in Cross River State, you'll see that his origin is traced to another state, not Cross River. That's to tell you that this food on the table works. It's called social security. That's what they practice all over the world in that advanced world. Only Cross River is doing this. And if every state was industrializing based on source of primary raw material, everybody will have his hands on their deck. So I am not indulging them without providing us with a training program. And that's how we have the Fabrication and Construction Academy, training them on how to have their skills on as we migrate them from food on the table to hands on the plow. Everybody has to sweat to be able to earn a living. But for you to sweat, you have to give you the environment for you to sweat. But if the environment is not there, at least eat until government provides that. And I think it's a strategic and normative framework that federal government must adopt in order to reduce domestic crime. And I say domestic deliberately, because most of these crimes are mediated by hunger and starvation. And this government must therefore come from this high horse of the understanding of development to how do I ensure that every citizen of Nigeria goes to bed with food on his stomach.
You didn't really talk about how do you generate wealth, the money to do the project.
Wealth generation is simple economics. You have a raw material, you add value, and you make money. Africa produces 86% of world cocoa, but only makes 6% of the income because of beneficiation pathway deficiency. You don't add value. Just look at a small country like Ghana. When they begin to put pressure on them on climate change and issues associated with ensuring that the amount of cocoa that Europeans say they will not buy their cocoa if they don't respect carbon footprint and what have you. So, okay, you do this, okay. From today, we will close our doors and start processing our cocoa and sell you only processed cocoa. What the president of Ghana I did in 2016, that I built the cocoa processing factory in Ikop, in Cross River State. The point I'm making is that primary production starts with growing raw material and adding value to it and putting it in the marketplace. So where there is no production, if I do a road, as soon as I'm done with that road ends nothing. doesn't generate income, it doesn't create jobs, it doesn't add to the economy. But if I put a small factory that takes bamboo and convert it to toothpick and export it, I get $1. I have a toothpick factory in Yakao local government in Cross River State. And today we have run out of organic bamboo because the ones we have were finished production. Ordinarily, that would have served as a kiosk to get people to now start having bamboo plantations. The gestation period is just 3 years. If you started from when I started building that factory, we will have a whole lot of bamboo to turn into toothpick. And that's why I signed a pact with the French government to give 25,000 hectares of land for bamboo cultivation in Cross River State to be able to feed the toothpick factory so that we stop the import of toothpick. This is primary production. This is how an economy is generated. That's why I have a policy of each local government, one industry, except local government like Akpabio, Bakassi, where the hostility and the closeness to the maritime security challenges are so huge that I concentrated the industry within one cluster called the South Senatorial District, Ayade Industrial Park. In that industrial park, you have an industry representing each local government area. So the recruitment process into those industries takes a little time because we have to evacuate these industries from government operations to private sector. And because I did a referendum and it suggests that we should not privatize the factories, we decided to do concession. The concessionaires are coming on board and discovering that they have huge challenge with power, electricity. For example, the vegetable oil factory I had mentioned earlier in Bekwara, the cost of diesel in Bekwara local government, I'm from Obudu local government, next door. A liter of diesel there is for 1,000 naira. And you're setting up a factory, and the factory requires diesel because there is never electricity. There's never electricity, shamefully. Now I'm talking with Maro of Holland. I just came back from Holland to finalize the first 1.2 megawatts, 100% solar. So all these difficulties on one governor, trying to create factories, trying to get them to run, trying to concession them, trying to generate power for them. How much do I get as an allocation? And somebody says I'll point his finger at governors. I think federal government should stop pointing fingers at governors. You frustrate us, you strangulate us, you can't borrow unless you go to DMO. DMO will look at your finances and say, sorry, I cannot give you this approval based on reality. For federal government, you have an unlimited borrowing source. And so you tie somebody's legs and turn back and accuse him. I think it's very unfair. Primary production is a function of industrialization, and which is the policy thrust of Ayade's administration, industrializing Cross River State. This governor who is taking over from me has a duty of breathing life into these industries. Get them to start working. That's his duty. My duty is that I've laid the foundation, I've taken the foundation beyond the window level. And that's why there should be consistency in policy. And that's why I'm supporting Senator Basio too, for power to return to the South in the first instance, which is justice. Just the same way we in the South think that it's just fair for power to come to the southern part of the country, to create a balance in this nation. It is nice for you to have even the very best candidate because we're Africans, because we're ethnic in nature. It is good to balance ethnic sensitivity. And so, in summary, Cross River State should be investigated as a model for states to copy in Africa, to create jobs for young people. Remove them from the street before you start accusing them, oh, they are becoming degenerate, they are deviants. Have you helped? What have you done as government? Government is not an individual. It's a corporate mind, and it must think big. You don't run like a glass. You run like a basket.
So give us an insight into where the IGR of the state stands as we speak. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, would you say with all that you have said you have done for the state that this is enough to convince the people to support your ambition as the senator for Cross River State North? Do you think that all of this will be able to convince them to support your ambition? Because democracy is about the people, no matter your wealth of experience. If you do not get the buy-in of the people, you cannot move anywhere.
Well, first, my IGR of the state, it hovers between 800 to 1.2 billion. But that 800 to 1.2 billion is in theory, because over 660 million of that is payee. And when you say payee, it's not cash earned, it's deductions, theoretical deductions on salaries. So if you add 660, you will now say, okay, you have 1 billion, 1.2 billion, but that money doesn't come in real fact. So you're out there down below the figures, and it's shameful. On a very good day, you're looking at 330 to 500, 600 million, X minus PE. As to whether my people of the North 2 Senatorial District will support me, please just watch and see. Look, the people of the North 2 Senatorial District, there are things I have done that are very, very, very strange. That you will ask me, can you imagine that I'm building an airport, an international cargo airport, and I am at the verge of starting the asphalting of the runway? I have a place, a terrain that I have 23 meters depth to fill, valleys. I have some places 20 meters to cut as mountains. And I'm struggling. And please ask how much I have spent. When I say intellectual money, I will come to that one other day. But
I would like to hear that now.
You like to hear that?
Yes.
I can explain to you. Now, let me bring intellectual money into physical analysis. Please, and you can quote me, check across the whole country and look at the cost of airport construction and check the cost of the airport that I'm building in Obudu. When I'm done with that airport by Q1 of next year, it will be the most beautiful and the most sophisticated airport in Nigeria. Quote me, and you will see it. You will see it. Even right now, send people to take pictures of what we have on ground. And what have I done called intellectual money? It's just like when I was doing the superhighway. We got Julius Berger to come in to give us a design of the superhighway and the routing, to set us a route. By the time they gave us the price, it was already our own projected, I don't, unfortunately, I've called the name of the company, so let me not call the figure. Multi-billions. And what did I do? I just called my team of surveyors and we sat down together. I said, give me a geolocation of Calabar and spot me the point of exit into northern Nigeria in Benue State. Draw a straight line on that map. Go to the ground, take every 30 meters, give me the coordinates, and that becomes our route. Shortest route to take us from Bakassi Deep Sea Port to northern Nigeria. And that decision, and I awarded a contract of 4 million per kilometer for debushing, open to everybody. Something I was to pay 60-something billion, I did under 3 billion naira by simply applying intellect. Simply applying intellect. In Cross River State, in the airport we are building, we deploy direct labor. I give you an example. Instead of awarding hundreds of billions of money for the earthworks, for cutting, I took Ministry of Agriculture, bought equipment from John Deere of US to bring those equipment in, hired Germans, advertised and hired Germans, use government equipment, and start doing the cutting. And so I cut the cost. Because normally when these people want to charge you, they charge you per cubic. If they charge you per cubic, you'll be looking at 220 to 300 per cubic to pay. So you will now see an airport costing 70, 80 billion. Don't blame those governors because that is the price. Julius Berger can only charge you per cubic. So you take the depth of the profile you want to cut, multiply by the length and the width, and that gives you the quantity in cubic. You multiply by the cost per cubic in dollar or in naira.
I'm afraid, Your Excellency.
Ayade decides that, sorry. Ayade decided that, sorry.
We need to wrap up this interview.
I'm going to hire the white people. They will become consultants and staff of the state government and work directly and get
Your Excellency,
anywhere that becomes critical, use a contractor to add up.
If you can hear me,
that's what we've done and bring down the cost.
If you can hear me, we need to wrap up this conversation now
Yeah,
for
you
want
have to
of
know
time.
that detail.
For want of time. But we must thank you, Executive Governor of Cross River State, Professor Ben Ayade, for your time on the program.
I don't think it's up to 1 hour yet. It's like 10 minutes. Honestly.
I know you can go on and on.
This federal government always, how can you have a country with a state that has very low allocation and you are not taking it as a deliberate policy to take over these industries from them.
All right, we have to leave this conversation here. Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
I know he can go on and on, but it
Yes.
was an interesting conversation.
Interesting conversation. Professor Ayade is always interesting personality to engage with because, you know, as I said, he has so many, about 7 degrees. And it's always very engaging to talk on any subject. I remember when I visited the other day, that was the first time I heard the word cotyledon since I left your brother's high school.
Well, this is where we have to draw the curtains on the program for today, but let's let you know that the views and reactions of all our resource persons are theirs and have no connection with TVC News. Thank you so much for watching.